New zones coming in Classic Plus data mining reveals. That's right, so just this morning we talked about it. Project Camelot has officially hit the Chinese servers, and Blizzard already announced a long time ago that Classic Plus will be a worldwide event. And worldwide, I do believe it will be. Speaking of worlds, how will Azeroth look, though, in Classic Plus? We got some information here about some of the new zones that are going to be revamped a bit in Classic Plus here from our boy, Thorin.
As Project Camelot aka Classic Plus is just around the corner, something really crazy has been going around the community. It's not a forum leak, some image or some insider information. It is actually a big data mine of massive changes to the actual map of Azeroth, specifically the Old Continents, Kalimdor, and the Eastern Kingdoms, the classic areas. Long story short, certain titles that indicate changes to the water or landmass were recently discovered, either for retail or classic, but seeing that classic is based on this area and the clients were merged, that is the most likely option. It shows potentially big changes to Gilneas, Mount Hyjal, really the classic areas of the game. So could this be a big indication of what Classic Plus is going to be about, and are they, in a way, revamping the classic world to introduce and expand the old zones? Let's look at everything we know.
Yeah, now I'm not a classic Andy by any means. You know, I'm not like the classic guy. You guys know I play retail on Twitch mostly, and I've dabbled here and there in some hardcore WoW. But really, classic doesn't. When you say a zone is going to be revamped for Classic Plus, it doesn't mean revamped in the same way that we do when we talk about retail, where it's like an up-res in graphics and brought up in higher fidelity and all that stuff. Revamp to me in Classic Plus means the zone's story is advancing and something in the zone has changed because the story is changing and things are moving forward. That's really what Classic Plus is all about. Classic Plus isn't about up-resing the world. In fact, I think that would piss people off if that's what it was. What it is it's the classic world and the way the mechanics work in Classic and the way the leveling and everything else, that whole style of gameplay, but with more stories added on. So more things discovered, more new bad guys showing up, a new layer with a dragon inside of it suddenly discovered at the top of the Eastern Kingdom, shit like that. Basically, the adventure continuing on once you're level 60 without going to through a dark portal and going to the Outland. So that's what Classic Plus is. So yeah, these zone revamps and everything else, they're really just story advancements in these zones. And that's why this stuff is it's kind of interesting to me because I love the stories in WoW.
It's out Midnight Season 2, and right now is like the perfect window of opportunity for you to really up your game to enter Season 2 with a very good plan. Overgear is offering the best WoW coaching, so don't learn the routes from outdated guides, don't go into the first raid nights blind. Overgear pairs you with the best WoW players to give you direct one-on-one time. They will live review your talents, gem links, raid tactics, and it's all up to date, literally up to today. So they will coach you with a new raid and you can save so much time and you can seriously get ahead.
Do you think they'll release it NA, EU, and Asia? Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think, and they're probably going to do like a simul release. At least like based on the time, it'll change, but probably like a one-day release all across the world. I think they want to turn this into a big world event.
To get ahead of everyone.
I'll also use Overgear.
So this is actually something the data miners had figured out a couple of months ago. I think it came out around May and has been going around the community, but recently it has picked up a bit more steam with BlizzCon coming out in a few weeks and almost certainly Classic Plus being real. Now this data mine is actually really interesting but mysterious at the same time. Classic Plus at this point is all but confirmed. The only reveal is going to be what will it be about, because it's not going to be just us going through the same expansions over and over and over again, nor some hardcore mode. This is very likely WoW starting from scratch, and as far as we know, Season of Discovery was like the testing grounds for this brand new mode. Recently, a lot has been happening with Project Camelot, from Blizzard shutting down a bunch of private servers that many contain the features that they actually plan to introduce in Camelot, so they don't want competition. So we got a lot of things being predicted for this, from new races, new zones, to completely new content we had never actually seen in World of Warcraft. Season of Discovery kind of did this.
And believe it or not, like a lot of these stories for Classic Plus, they've already been written. When Blizzard was originally making vanilla WoW, like the original WoW, there was a lot of stories and a lot of zones that just never came to fruition. Obviously, you know, that happens with every game. You write a bunch of stuff up, and then some of it, you know, gets cut out and is stuck on the cutting room floor. It happens with movies, too. So there's plenty of content out there that they could add to classic WoW that's already been written and is ready to go. And it was written by the OG team, which is, gives it those probably same OG vibes that really classic WoW gives. So I'll be interested to see where some of these stories come from. Even some of the races and stuff that'll be playable, like ogres were an original race that was already put into the game and was kind of pulled last second, kind of replaced with trolls. So there's a lot of shit out there that's ready to go. Blizzard just has to kind of make it and put it into the game.
A couple of zones, but I think that was just scratching the surface. The premise of Season of Discovery was found memories, so the same timeline that we're currently in, but we're just seeing things that happened that we didn't originally witness, as after all, we were just one character. You could, for example, be in the Barrens or then Ashenvale, but you couldn't be at Silitus at the same time. Here, we are probably going to witness events that we...
See, that's a Death Knight. This guy showed up in Season of Discovery. So you can have like a class like Death Knights show up without ever really going to Northrend, maybe, in Classic. This guy was the OG Death Knight, Gregory. If you don't know his story, it's really cool. And yeah, he's a Death Knight in Classic before we ever go to Northrend, which is really cool. Is it possible they'll have dungeons, dynamic difficulties like Torghast and stuff? I don't know. I don't think they'll have seasonal content. I think that's kind of anti-Classic. They don't want seasonal stuff. They really want like progressive things happening. So I don't know if you'll see like progressive content or dynamic difficulty content like that. Greg from Accounting's full name. Yes, Gregory. Yes, exactly.
Didn't personally witness back in the day. However, this particular data mine is first of all confusing, but could actually be huge if we figure out what is exactly going on. So, on first glance, it appears just like a bunch of red boxes were discovered across Kalimdor and the Eastern Kingdom that make about 0 sense, but when you examine the details, it appears that big things are possibly happening behind the screen. So, to sum it up real quick, essentially the WoW map has a bunch of these checkerboard land tiles, and Blizzard very recently added a completely new info box for some of these called VDT Chunk MIE2. I know this sounds like complete gibberish, but this was actually a recent addition in Midnight. However, what made this interesting is that these new tiles were found across the old world, across Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor, specifically the Classic zones. This makes sense because recently they had apparently merged the Classic and the Retail clans together, and some things could have spilled over. Actually, we have a whole history of these tech changes in the files that appeared in the files way too early. For example, we had discovered the data for the allied races all the way back in Legion, and they only came out like mid-BFA. Now, here's the thing, since the last Titan is in Northrend, but we do have a revamp of Retail in the talks for after the saga, this could either be the big revamp of Azeroth that they have talked about and that we have discovered this way too early, or it could instead be Classic, which is almost certainly going to get announced in just a couple of weeks. Honestly, that seems a bit more probable, especially since Classic Plus is supposed to be entirely based on the Classic continents, and this is exactly where all these tiles are. Now, supposedly these little boxes are about water changes, but could in fact imply land assets as well, and given the fact that there are no zones on some of these tiles, we aren't expecting a massive change like map overhaul, but potentially some new areas that could be introduced. So let's check this out. The Eastern Kingdoms seem to have most of these changes, specifically around Stormwind and exactly the Classic area where most of the activity is, because in Classic, Stormwind and Orgrimmar were really the main hubs, kind of the center of the universe. There are also some quite...
What Stormwind really wasn't, though, for the Alliance. I mean, they might be in Classic Plus, but I feel like on the Alliance side, if you played back in the OG days, it was really Ironforge. Like, that's where I remember spending a lot of my time. I started playing in 2005, and I just remember being in the main cavern of Ironforge, sitting right there between the bank and the auction house, which is really why a lot of people spent their time there, is because of that convenience of that location. But that was where like a lot of the Alliance just hung out. So, I mean, Stormwind was kind of forced upon us, as it became more and more of a hub city as you went through expansions. With the portal rooms and everything else, but really it was like Ironforge was the place for the Alliance to hang out.
Interesting changes to Stranglethorn, the eastern area, specifically some changes to around the Plaguelands, and lesser changes to Forsaken areas. However, the big, really interesting changes are around the Gilneas parts of the map, which could indicate something really interesting happening. Now, I've talked about this for months, but this is exactly the type of content that we could see in Classic Plus that was set up in Season of Discovery. See, Gilneas was a big deal around the Orcish Wars. They were kind of as important as Lordaeron. Then they had isolated themselves with this giant wall, and then we only got to see them in Cataclysm when they completely fell apart and the wall was completely shattered, and then the Forsaken invaded. Before that, however, we only saw like this wall wall, and behind that wall, a lot of things happening, essentially a whole expansion's worth of content. They weren't just sitting around, but we had about zero insight about what was going on inside.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you could easily introduce things like the Worgen without a cataclysm, right? Which was the expansion they came in, you know, and all that stuff. You could easily see Worgen becoming a playable race in Classic Plus. Why? Because furries want to play Classic Plus too. We all know that. So they could easily introduce Worgens in some sort of other way rather than the Cataclysm breaking the gate open, which was kind of how it happened in retail.
Classic Plus could explore exactly what happened in Gilneas between Classic and Cataclysm, and there is a lot of room for a whole bunch of storytelling. Now, Kalimdor has slightly less of these red tiles, but still there are changes to the areas, specifically Teldrassil, Angoro Crater, and interestingly enough, Mount Hyjal. This is also something I've talked about for a while as well. Mount Hyjal is like the Kalimdor version of Gilneas. Warcraft 3 essentially ended on Mount Hyjal. It was like this incredibly important lore area of Warcraft in general, and instead of ever kind of seeing it, we only saw the destroyed area in Cataclysm that was significantly altered. I mean, sure, Mount Hyjal was significantly damaged at the end of the Third War, but Mount Hyjal that we saw in Cataclysm was completely changed with the involvement of Ragnaros and all this Cataclysm stuff, and in Classic, this area was restricted, so here we literally got a whole batch of content that we could actually see here. We could see what happened after Warcraft 3, we could explore a completely different storyline. So overall, this is incredibly realistic. I mean, there is definitely some map change and something is happening. It's not just a speculation, but the only real question right now is, what is this map change about? Is it for something that will come out soon or something later? Because Classic Plus is almost certainly getting announced literally just a couple of weeks from this video.
Oh yeah,
but at the
it'll
same
be announced
time,
at
we have
BlizzCon.
big evidence for an old world revamp after The Last Titan, and based on that timeline leak, it's not actually that far. I mean, we're talking Last Titan being announced in just a couple of weeks, so 2026, release 2027. We could learn already about the revamp of Azeroth and like the return to the old world in 2028. So at the same time, we could...
I mean, call it a bold prediction. I actually think there's a chance that Classic Plus will be like playable on the floor at BlizzCon. We've seen them do that before. And just remember, like Classic Plus, it already exists. It's Classic WoW. It's already out there. The plus part of it's just added content. So they don't got to worry about like alpha and beta testing this shit to make sure like the human run and warrior abilities are good. It's already fine. Everything works. So I could totally see them being like, hey, Classic Plus is announced. By the way, it's here to start playing right now. And then fucking everyone goes nuts and all the nerds start busting everywhere and everything. Like that shit could definitely happen at BlizzCon. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see like a playable beta version or whatever of Classic Plus out there at BlizzCon.
Potentially be looking at areas of Azeroth that we are going to get revamped or impacted by the revamp for the expansion after the saga, which is 14.0. However, though, Classic...
When is BlizzCon? September 12th, I think 12th and 13th. So yeah, it's coming up.
Plus is still high, like in leak speculation territory. We still don't know what exactly it is about, but based on the leaks, the data mines, the evidence, and everyone in the community talking about it, the fact is that Blizzard has been hiring new devs, shutting down private servers. It's likely that this is actually going to be something big, some completely new project that we had never seen. It could really be like WoW 2 in a way, starting from scratch, but not some different timeline, different Warcraft, but just WoW we had never seen before. And seeing how big Azeroth is, they realistically have a lot of room to introduce new content just on Kalimdor in the Eastern Kingdoms, to just expand the world that is already there. We don't gotta go to Outland, but they could technically even introduce us visiting the continents that were added later down the line, just visiting them in different contexts, depending on what it is. I'm honestly optimistic. I think it could turn out to be something very interesting. I think Seasonal Discovery, which was actually quite experimental, was just testing the waters. I think this is going to be a really big project, and that this Camelot has been in the works for years. Thanks for watching. Check out the potential playable Vrykle that could be announced on BlizzCon by clicking on the screen, and check out my brand new Witcher lore channel by clicking on the screen as well. See you next time.
Yeah, interesting stuff. I definitely think we're going to see some revamps. Again, not up-resing, but revamps in terms of new stories, new parts of these old zones. And yeah, I could see them actually like adding a Northrend continent at some point. We go there for in a different way, for different reasons, whatever it is, because that it really does feel still classic. It could be made in a classic way. But for the most part, I think we're going to, if you're playing Classic Plus, you're going to be spending all your time in old Azeroth, right? The Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor. That's going to be the main focus, and that's where all the stories are going to be told. So cool stuff, exciting stuff for anyone who's excited about Classic Plus, and we'll be getting more news on this at BlizzCon for sure. Nice video overall from Thorin.